It's a great pleasure and honor to be introducing Gerald Papasian tonight as our 2016 Distinguished Dr. Berj Haidostian Annual Lecture. I would like to acknowledge and thank Dr. Haidostian's family members present with us tonight. Mrs. Alice Haidostian, their daughter Cynthia Wilbanks, their son Dikran Haidostian, for their loyalty and continuous support of the Armenian Studies program. The Dr. Berj Haidostian Annual Distinguished Lecture was established by the family of the late Dr. Haidostian, a prominent and devoted physician, in honor of his long relationship with the University of Michigan and the Armenian Studies program. Every year we have a distinguished lecture from multidisciplinary perspectives. In the last few years, we have favored visual culture and the performing arts, inviting speakers like Atom Egoyan, Eric Bogosian, and Marie Aude Baronian, and this year, Gerald Papasian. I would also like to thank our programmer, Naira Tumanyan, for her superb efforts in making this evening's event possible. And now to our speaker tonight. Gerald Papasian is an actor, stage director, and translator. He is currently a Manugyan visiting fellow at our Armenian Studies program, who has spent the last 2 months as an artist in residence, teaching a mini course on Armenian theater and opera in the 19th century Ottoman Empire. As you will see, he's passionate about his work and committed to the vision of bringing Armenian opera onto the stage of the international performing arts. Born in Cairo, Egypt, Papasian comes from a well-known musical family that established the first music stores in Alexandria during the 1920s and later in Cairo. His grandfather, Gerald Papasian, was a tuner and piano builder whose services were solicited across the African continent and in the Middle East. Papasian began to study piano at the age of 4. He tells me now he's forgotten it, under the tutelage of his great aunt Nevart Damadian, a graduate of the École Nationale de Musique in Paris, and a renowned piano teacher who performed at the Cairo Conservatory of Music. His childhood love for music has now turned into a lifetime career in theater. From the Melkonian Educational Institute in Cyprus, a well-known boarding school that actually first was created as an orphanage after the genocide by 2 brothers, Grigor and Garabet Melkonian, prominent tobacco traders in Egypt, Papasian went to study acting and directing in Armenia, securing his first internship at the State Fine and Dramatic Arts Institute in Soviet Armenia. These internships at the National Opera of Armenia and later in St. Petersburg cultivated his love for directing. Papasian's international career has spanned over 20 years, with many accolades in theater as director and translator of Armenian works, published plays, poetry, and librettos, adapting and performing them into multiple languages of English, French, and Armenian worldwide. Papasian's vision and desire lies in bringing to an international public the works of Dikran Chuhadjian, the first composer of opera in the Ottoman Empire. Chuhadjian was born in Istanbul in 1837. He studied opera in Milan and deployed the medium of opera as a form of proto-national consciousness. In his works, Chuhadjian used elements of European musical techniques, blending them with Armenian folk melodies. His musical language is deeply rooted in popular traditions. He would stroll through the streets, listening and noting down pieces of songs, rhythmic patterns, and even bits of conversations to use as raw material for his operas. He composed the first Armenian opera, Arshak II, in 1868, based on a historical figure, King Arshak II. It is the first grand Armenian opera, with choruses and ballets, and was performed in 1945 at the Armenian Opera Theater in Yerevan. In 2001, it was staged at the San Francisco Opera. Papasian founded the Dikran Chouhadjian International Institute in Paris, which has acted as the impresario for the historical reconstruction of the 1868 original score of Arshak II. The complete conductor's score, vocal score, orchestra parts, and librettos in Italian, English, and Armenian were published thanks to the efforts of the Institute in Paris, with funding provided by AGBU of Egypt. Papasian has received noteworthy directional credits in Detroit as well, that include the Western world premiere of the opera Anush, a 5-act opera composed by Armen Tigranian, based on poems written by Hovhannes Tumanyan in 1892. Anush was performed at the Michigan Opera Theater both in 1981 and in 2001 with the patronage of Mrs. Alice Haidostian. And finally, Papasian also produced the integral version of Chouhadjian's lighter opera, the opera Bufa, Lebleji Horor Agha, literally Horor, the chickpea vendor, also known as Garine in Armenian, which was performed in Paris, London, and New York. He has recently discovered more complete versions of Lebleji Horor Agha in a defunct French publishing house's archive. A fascinating find, which we historians love. He will be talking to us tonight about it. So please join me in welcoming Gerald Papasian.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I think Catherine Babayan helped me a lot in describing Chouhadjian, and I will not go into it, so it will give me more time to talk more about recent events and manuscripts. First of all, let me say that I feel very honored to be your guest lecturer today on this prestigious series of lectures created by Dr. Haidostian. I'm very glad that Alice is here with us and the whole family. And I really thank Catherine Babayan for inviting me to give a mini-series lecture here in Ann Arbor. It's my first time, and it's over tomorrow, and I enjoyed my stay. I would also like to thank, of course, the executive committee who supported the idea, and especially two quite close friends, in this case, Professor Suni, Ronald Suni, and Professor Kevork Bardakjan. Thank you very much. I'm always happy to see you, and to be part of this faculty is an honor for me. I have special thanks to our academic program specialist, Naira Tumanyan, because she went out of her way trying to help me with some incredible amount of paperwork I had never seen in my life before in order to get into this university. And I couldn't make it without her. Next time I will ask Ms. Babayan to bring me here only for 1 week, because a mini course is, maybe the paperwork will be less. No?
I doubt it.
You doubt it. Well, in that case, I might as well come for 1 or 2 years. It's the same thing. Anyway, thank you very much, Naira. You were a great help. I don't see you. I don't know where it is. But anyway. Now, where shall I begin? This is a long story, because we're going to talk about Armenian opera, musical theater, not so much theater in this case. I will concentrate on opera, but it is such an unknown subject that one has to almost go back to Adam and Eve, or at least to the patriarch of Armenia, Haik, to explain what happened. Let us just concentrate in this case about the question of why we talk about Armenian opera and theater. Well, as I said, the answer is very simple. It is unknown. That's why. And it is even unknown to most Armenians, I would say. Some works, some authors are better kept unknown. That's true. But in the heritage of Armenian opera and theater, we have some composers, some writers, who definitely deserve the merit to be part of the international constellation. And the fact that they are not makes me fill with a sense of injustice, much more so than any other nationalistic feelings. It's not a question of whether these people were Armenians or not. For me, it's a question whether the work they have created is beautiful or not. And is it good music, in this case, if we talk about opera, or not. And to put worthy works of art that have not been diffused, let us say, on the international stage has become a kind of, let's say, inverted commas, mission for me. I'm not going to, a dream. And again, it comes out of a sense of injustice. I chose tonight one example, in this case, Dikran Chuhajian, who symbolizes, in a way, that period of history, which is the most unknown period, which is the 19th century Constantinople Armenian community. Constantinople, today's Istanbul, where a lot of Armenian intellectuals had gathered, and during the mid-19th century, a kind of reawakening had happened, and theater flourished, especially. As you can well imagine, because the Turks were Muslims, they didn't like too much the idea of getting on stage and playing, especially women at that time. That only happened when later Turkey became a republic, and secular republic. And then, of course, everything changed. But that's why Armenians suddenly found themselves being having the monopole of theater in general, whether playing in Armenian or playing in Turkish. And theaters flourished, professional theaters and companies flourished, and our hero, Dikran Chuhajian, started to write operas. His first opera, as you heard Catherine say, was Arshak II, but he wrote it at the time in Italian, with an Armenian writer, a poet, a playwright, who knew perfect Italian, and he wrote the libretto. The original name of Arshak II is Arzace II. That's the real title of the opera, and it's all written in Italian. Now, the music also sounds very Italian. So sometimes I insist on the fact that it is not entirely correct to call it the first Armenian opera. It just is Armenian because the subject matter is Armenian. It's a 4th century Armenian king, etc. It is a 19th century typical romantic bel canto Italian opera, which happens to have been written by some composer who was not Italian in origin. That's all. But it doesn't mean that it's worthless because of that. Some people automatically consider it, no, if it is Italian, it's not interesting. Now, it's a beautiful piece which still awaits its full original production, decently done the way the authors, the librettist and Chuhajian had intended. About almost 150 years later, he composed it in 1868, so in 2 years it will be the 150th anniversary of the creation of this first operatic piece, which is not only the first, let's say, Armenian opera, or first opera composed by an Armenian, but it is also the very, very first opera, in grand opera, professional opera, composed in the entire Near East, all the Ottoman Empire, and all the way to the east. I could almost say that besides European countries, Italy, France, Germany, and maybe South America, it is a first, as far as this first creation. It's a very important thing to celebrate one day, the 150th anniversary of his peace. Now, why do I say that it is not yet really performed? You heard just now that it was produced in 1945. What happened is that, first of all, Chouhadjian wrote in 68, and there was a very rich sponsor, Balyan, Hagop Balyan, from the famous architects, Balyan family, who loved the arts and who encouraged artists, etc. And he was willing to pay for the production. Of course, there were no Armenian professionals or Turkish professionals at the time to do that, so they used to have visiting Italian or French companies to come to Constantinople, and they approached those companies saying that, would you perform this for us? And there was an Italian company who was interested in it. They had started some rehearsals, more or less, and there was one very beautiful European-style, Italian-style theater called the Naum Theater, which was going to house it, and that's where Italian companies used to come and perform. It's just burnt down in 1870, and it was never rebuilt. There was no other place. In the meantime, at the same moment, the Balyan had a personal tragedy in his life. His wife died at childbirth, and he didn't survive. 2 years later, he died a broken man. And so that stopped. And later, very quickly, it is the reign of Sultan Abdul Hamid that comes in 1876. And that ends every kind of performance which has anything to do with any, even remotely, nationalistic or patriotic thing, because he was terrified by that. And of course, any kind of socialistic ideology or whatever, even for Turkish authors. So censorship began, and that's the end, for 30 years. Of course, in the case of this opera, it doesn't apply because it was written in Italian, but just to give you an idea of the mood of the period, at a certain point, Abdul Hamid even banned all Armenian-speaking performances on stage. So those Armenian professionals who had used to make a living out of it started to perform in Turkish. And for 30 years, only Turkish language was used on the stage in Constantinople. So, impossible for Chouhadjian to produce, despite some scholars who think that it was produced at the time, but there's no real source to it. It's not serious. There's no, it's not referenced. It's just wishful thinking. But in 1945, what happened is that after Chouhadjian's death, his archives were lost, etc. And then finally, it was found in Paris because his widow died in Paris. And in the 1920s, or 25, Arshak Chobanyan, a prominent writer, intellectual in Paris, sent the archives to Armenia, to the Literature and Art Museum of Yerevan in Armenia. And believe it or not, during the Second World War, in the middle of the Second World War, a professor, a musicologist called Tigranov, started to work on those archives, and he put things together and discovered that there's a big opera here. They immediately gathered director of the opera house, musicologists, writers, composers, etc., and they liked the piece, and they said that we have to present this, produce this, especially at the end of the war in 1945. They began, this first meeting was held in 1942, but they realized, and that is my own personal assumption, so it's not scientific, but I think I'm correct in assuming that when they saw the subject matter of the libretto, and they saw that typical to any Italian libretto of that period, the head of the country, the king, the prince, the duke, is always the bad guy, and it has to be, there has to be a revolt against those tyrants, etc. It was written in that way. So Arshak II, the king of Armenia of the 4th century, was a tyrant in the opera, who killed all his buddies around him to rule. He caused the death of his own wife, Olympia, who was a Greek Byzantine princess. And so I guess they must have been scared of Stalin, saying that if we produce this, we will all be, find ourselves doing some operas in the gulags or somewhere. So there are the minutes of that 1942 period where they're not talking, of course, about these things. They're just saying that the subject is not very well developed and the characters are not very well. We have to change. Now, they appoint some Soviet Armenian writer, Gulakian, who was also a stage director, opera stage director, to write a new libretto, discarding completely Terzian's original libretto, Italian, to write a libretto in Armenian and completely a different story. In the new libretto, typical to that period of the Soviet Union and, of course, the necessity of optimistic endings, because the original is a tragic finale and this is a happy ending. The Arshak's second character becomes Stalin in the politically correct way, meaning that he is a very powerful, very strong leader, but with a kindest heart on the planet. He is completely virtuous, no womanizing, nothing, no love affairs. And he is the father, or if you wish, the little father of the people, and everybody loves him. So this is how they changed the story, which is not, they again based on original historical facts by 5th century historians, Pavestos Puzant and Movses Khorenatsi, for those who know, who insist a lot on Arshak's crimes and bloodthirsty things, his private intrigues with his wife and his mistress, the Armenian princess, Parantsem, etc. But at the same time, you can see also that they praise his early years, and he has been a great king, juggling between East and West, in this case Byzantium and Persia. And thanks to him, Armenia enjoyed several decades of peace. So he was, there's this controversial figure, a tragic hero, Arshak II, who is at the same time condemned by people who were from the clergy, the two historians. And so we don't know. So basically, they chose the positive aspect, while Terzian had chosen the negative aspect. And that is understandable. I even say almost bravo, because they found a way to put the opera on the stage despite the Kremlin. And the KGB. So they said, okay, well, we'll do something else, but we'll put the opera. What is totally impossible to understand until today with all other musicologists and composers that I have talked with and read a lot of things, is why did they change the music? And this is one of the best kept secrets of the opera house of Yerevan. It is advertised as Dikran Chukhajian 1868, opera in 4 acts, and the music contains perhaps 20% of Chukhajian's work, or themes from his work, and they assigned a young Soviet composer called Hoja Einatian to write totally new music. There are some beautiful melodies. He should have written a new opera himself. And of course, they must have told him, you just shut up. Otherwise, Siberia. That's it. So he couldn't claim that, they couldn't even say that it is adapted or something. I always tell the opera people in Armenia that if you advertise it as Arshak II composer Hoja Einatian, freely inspired from themes by Chukhajian, it could work. You're right, 1945. But don't say this is Dikran Chukhajian, Arshak II, 1868. It's nothing to do with the original work. So you have the language is changed, the subject, the plot is changed, the music is changed. Also the orchestration and everything else, and it's a mishmash of different genres where you have some Italian bel canto, thanks to some of the Chouhadjian themes that are there, but you also have early romantic Tchaikovsky type styles, and then all the way to social realism of Soviet period, etc. Everything is completely mixed up. So this is why we cannot say that the original work had been performed, and until today they are still performing it. Now, in 2001, there was this violinist, Armenian, Gerald Papasian, who was playing in the orchestra of San Francisco Opera House, who wanted to do something for Armenian culture on the occasion of the 1700th anniversary of the Christianity in Armenia. And he convinced the San Francisco Opera director to put on Arshak II. And the moment they heard, because there was nothing in English, and that's one of the reasons why this culture is never known until now. Sometimes nothing is translated properly. I'm talking about the performing arts. Nothing is translated properly. So, history of Armenian theater, it doesn't exist in English or in French, really, for historians to look at. Everything is in Armenian. So, they found out that there was this person in Paris called Gerald Papasian, who in 1981 had done an Armenian opera in an American town. That was the beginning of all this thing. That was Detroit. At the Michigan Opera Theater, 1981, Anush was performed. Thanks to the open-mindedness and interest of the founder, producing director, artistic director of the Michigan Opera Theater, David DiChiera, Dr. David DiChiera, who is, in a way, afterwards, in 25 years of life that I had professional, I realized that he is quite unique. Quite unique. You don't meet people like that every day in your life, who are willing to take risks and to put on totally unknown works from unknown cultures. Of course, since we are talking about that, I just went back now. It also needs a very quick-minded person who jumps at the opportunity when he hears David DiChiera saying, let us put on something different than the usual French, Italian, and German repertoire. And that person comes to him and says, David, there's an Armenian opera, why don't you do that? And that was Alice Haidosian, who's here. And she was instrumental, not only later to find fundings, etc., etc., that's a big amount of work, but just to tell David DiChiera, okay, you want a non-classical or whatever opera that is not usually performed, do an Armenian one. And that's how Anush began. But that is very rare, unfortunately. I'm still looking for, until today, for David DiChiera's and Alice Haidosian's to continue this dream. It's very rare in France, in England, in America. It's not easy. Anyway, what was I saying? The Anush was the beginning of my desire to continue in this way. And so the San Francisco people, when they heard that I had an experience in that, they called me up and said, "What do you have the libretto of Arshak II in English?" I said, "No, it doesn't exist." So they said, "Can you send us the summary of it?" And I unintentionally opened a can of worms because I was just working on it at that time, and I said, "Which version?" They said, "What? There are two versions?" Yes. There's the original version and then there's the Soviet version. What are the differences? So I told them and said, "Can you send us both versions, summaries, you know?" The moment they received the two versions, they asked, then they wanted to listen to the original version's music. In the meantime, they had received the scores from Armenia. So they asked me and the musicologists who worked for 2 years to put into a computer and then finally publish it, thanks to the AGBU of Egypt at the end. The Urtext, as they say in German, the original material score as it exists in the museum, handwritten. It was only one manuscript, unique manuscript, never performed before. So thanks to that, they decided to perform it, but then they have had some problems with Armenian communities protesting that you promised something in Armenian. We are used to hearing Arshak II, our Arshak II in Armenian, etc. So they decided to translate it into Armenian. And the San Francisco Opera said, okay, we'll do it in Armenian, but the original version anyway. The melody, the music will be the original version. We'll translate the Italian into Armenian, not your version. So that's what they did. That's one of the reasons why I can say today that the original version of the piece is not yet performed as intended by the authors, although San Francisco did the original version. The other thing is that, unfortunately, because of union laws, I think, I, as an actor, love the unions because they protect us, so don't misunderstand me. But still, in art, sometimes you get quite crazy about the limited rehearsal times and hours, and also performance times. So they must have said to the conductor of Arshak II, not more than 2 hours. The opera is a big one. It's a biggie. It's like Don Carlos of Verdi. I don't know, it's maybe not 4 hours, but 3 hours, or something like that. So he cut. So those who heard Arshak II in San Francisco heard 2/3 almost of the piece. Unfortunately, cuts were made. Not a scene was cut. It would have been better to cut the entire scene, but cuts were made into arias, into musics. Some modulations were cut for those who understand music, which turned the aria into a childish song, and in one word. And then they speeded up the tempis to such an extent that the dramatic, tragic thing became a light-hearted Viennese waltz. So I don't think they did just. I mean, they didn't spare efforts. They spent $2-3 million on it. $1 million was donated by the Armenian community. The orchestra and chorus were fantastic. The San Francisco Orchestra, I mean, is just unbelievable. I can do like this in front of them and they will play it anyway. So the singers were first-rate, wonderful singers, and it went off well. I mean, globally, the public appreciated it. They had standing ovations every night, etc. But some American critics wrote quite nasty things. Not all of them. There are some papers who wrote it's a triumph, blah, blah, blah. But some critics, 3 of them, 3 out of 12, I would say, were quite nasty about it, saying that this guy doesn't know how to compose, or he has never had any lesson in composition. Whereas Chouhadjian is our only professional great composer of the 19th century. He is universally, professionally, bona fide, a great composer. And he knows orchestration perfectly. And it is normal, because if it were a piece from Verdi, the critic would have said, oh, the conductor or whatever, the production ruined it. But it's an unknown work, so they don't know it, so they assume that that's what the composer wrote. They will not go back and look at the scores and whatever. So basically, I say it didn't do real justice, although it was a big premiere, a grand premiere that they did finally. We heard at least part of a great part of the original music. That was the reason why I said that we still wait the day when we will be able. And my dream about this one is that if we can convince some great company to at least, because it's so expensive, to at least do a decent concert version and record it and have at least once and for all one complete integral version of this opera, which I'm sure opera lovers will be interested. I know it because we've started working on the Italian language with a composer friend of mine right now, and we discovered what we didn't discover at the time, because they sang in Armenian, so nobody knew that the Italian had problems too. So now with 2 Italian experts who are experts of 19th century Italian language and poetry, rules and regulations, we're working on correcting all those Italian stuff. Otherwise, if you did give it like that to an Italian company, they will not sing it like that. So I only know that people involved in helping us, and musicians, musicologists, Italians, Canadian, English, etc., are loving the piece. Now, I know it's not my own fantasy. I know they adore it. So that being said, you may ask some questions later about that, maybe, but I will pass to yet another piece, another work of Chouhadjian that Catherine just mentioned that I did in Paris. I didn't do it in New York yet. That's good, wonderful wishful thinking. No, I did it in Paris and London. This in French and in English. It's called Leblebiji Horhor Aha, which is the Horhor Aha, the chickpea vendor. That Chouhadjian, giving up writing grand operas about Armenian kings, in 1875 wrote this funny, slapstick almost, opera buffa with a fantastic sense of humor in his music. And that's where he was able also to put much more Oriental, Eastern music into the piece. And he was very, very clever in making East meeting West, which is the typical thing of Constantinople, Europe and Asia. And unfortunately, after his death, when the Turks perform it, they cut some European-sounding things, and when the Armenians perform it in Armenia, they cut some Turkish-sounding things. So it's quite funny when you see how each one treats, or sometimes they just change the tempis and then it sounds more Turkish or it sounds more European. In Armenia, they produced an Armenianized version, if I may say so, called Garine. Garine comes from the 1940s of Soviet Armenia, the name. The original name of the girl, Garine is a girl, is Fatime, or Fatima. And it takes place in the Seraglio of the 18th century, when the young Turkish prince falls in love with a girl called Fatime, etc., and asks his slaves to kidnap her and bring her to his harem. And the father, who's a poor chickpea vendor, comes knocking at the door trying to save his girl from this immoral place. Unfortunately, the girl is in love with the prince and she doesn't want to go back, so at the end he has to give in. That's the original story. The Armenians took that story and used it almost in the same manner, but changed the names. So Khurshid Bey became Armen, Fatime became Garine, Sansar Hassan became Jardar Markar, etc. Unfortunately, they didn't adapt the thing properly, so that in the Armenian version, when I looked at it the first time, I said, where is she exactly? Is she living with this Armenian guy at home in 19th century? Armenians not married yet, and she's because the harem story goes out. There's no harem. So where is she exactly? And why is the father so much eager to save her? From where exactly? So it's not unclear, but as you well know, the music is so gorgeous that nobody cared about whether it was coherent or not. Everybody enjoyed it, and they made a film out of it in Armenia. Actually, 2 films were made, one silent and one talkie films, early by Turkey, İpek Productions. Silent film, 1918 maybe, or something like that. And the other one, kind of 1930s. And that second one won a special prize at the International Venice Film Festival. They don't exist. They told me in Turkey everything is burnt. Or maybe one day one of you will find it. It's worth investigating. But in 1967, Armenians made a film out of it. Those who have seen it, it's called Garine, have enjoyed the beautiful music, but half of it, because especially in the case of a film, they couldn't do the entire piece. It would have lasted 3 hours. So, but they chose some of the best moments of Chouhadjian's music, and it's quite a good film for the period. But of course, the orchestration is not the original orchestration, and that is one of the things that I wanted to discuss. Before I get any further, I just will ask for your patience, just to give a little example, maybe 10 minutes, not more, maybe less. I will try to jump live. Let's see if this will work. This is just a segment, just highlights of the French production of, it's working? Yeah, of the French production. And they're all young singers, professional singers. You will see their enthusiasm. They're doing a very good job. There's only one imposter in it, who is not a singer, but who is playing the role of an opera singer. And that's me. So please forgive me for that. So this gives you a little idea about the music. Very short. There's about an hour and a half music in this piece, and of course this is done with by the means of my own association. I didn't have any support from any subsidies, unfortunately, or any funding. So we did what we called it at the very beginning. There was a narrator who said, "Okay, guys, you see the stage is empty. So there's nothing on the space of the stage, and we call that in theater an empty space. And we call this minimalism, etc." We made jokes out of it. It became a running gag. She was singing at the balcony. It was just a trapeze. There was no walls, nothing. And the narrator comes in and says, "Garine is at her balcony." That's minimalism, etc. And we made jokes about it. The orchestra was only 10 people, 10 instruments, specially created for the occasion. The chorus was only 15, and the singers, the soloists are 5. We had 2 dancers, and that's it. So we asked the chorus and the singers to move and dance as well as sing. And in Europe, opera singers don't like that very much. But this is a new generation. They're young. They enjoyed doing it. This is the first try, 2010. And things were improved later, and the last one I did in Paris, it was just a couple of months ago. It was in November, past November. But the important thing for me is the following. Musically, it works. The French adored it, the public, the singers, the conductor, everybody, and also the critics. And that was a good test. Something is whistling here. That was... It stopped? Yeah. Ah, bravo. That's scientific. Okay. Yeah. So, it's... we should just turn this off. That's... Okay. It's off. Okay. The other thing is that we did it in London, and I was wondering how the English will react to it. The French said, "Oh, it sounds just like Offenbach," and the English said, "Oh, it sounds just like Gilbert and Sullivan." So for me, it is funny that it's universal enough for every nation to recognize something in it, which is they call it their own. The enthusiasm the singers put into it, and especially in England. You know how cool are the English. You should have seen what they did with it. They were crazy. And I always say one thing. No stage director, nobody can put that kind of enthusiasm into the singers and to the actors if they don't like the music. That is clear. So all the credit goes to Chouhadjian, who is now proven that he can transcend any national boundaries and be accepted by everyone. It is accessible to European ears, but the beauty of this particular piece especially is that, as you noticed probably, he switches from Eastern motifs to Western motifs very cleverly. And that's what I did in my production. And just to finish it in one word, quickly, this chapter, I created a new libretto based, because I didn't want to do the original libretto was not good enough for me, the Turkish one. It's written in Turkish in the original, so I forgot to say. It's outdated, and it's very repetitive. It's the same story that in 3 acts that repeats itself. So I had to change things, and also I changed based on the music. Since in the music there was East and West, I found it very funny to see in the Seraglio, in a harem atmosphere, people dancing a kind of Viennese type of waltz. And in Armenia, to see suddenly in the middle of an Armenian wedding or something, people dancing, belly dancing. I mean, the music is like that. So I put the two together, and the 2 cultures met in my version, which was a play within a play. So it's an Armenian theater company in Constantinople, which is historically true, who puts on a tale of Arabian Nights, 1001 Nights tale. And so they're disguised as and you have harem scenes as you see here, etc. And so I reintegrated the entire harem musical sequence that was cut in Armenia by saying that is a false harem, it's a theater. In the original, it's a true one, but musically it doesn't change. So this is Garine. Quickly, before I finish, I would like to talk about the manuscripts. Well, the original orchestration, instrumentation of Dikran Chukhajan's Garine, which at the time toured all over the Ottoman Empire in Greece, Egypt, Romania, Bulgaria, whatever, and was translated in different languages, is lost. Now, there is no orchestration. We have in our hands, in the museum in Yerevan and in Turkey, piano scores or vocal scores, if you wish, but no orchestration. So everyone has done his own orchestration. In Armenia, for the film and other productions they did on stage, they did their orchestrations. The Turks did their own stuff. We did for 10 people, but even if there was the real orchestration, we couldn't have done it because probably it needs at least 40 musicians for a light operetta. But we knew that a writer had written in 1926, an Armenian writer in a paper, about Chukhajan, life, work, etc., saying that, by the way, the original manuscript, the original scores are at a publishing house in Paris called Joubert. I went to Paris and I said, where is Joubert? They said it doesn't exist since the Second World War. So finally, to cut a long story short, we found out that the Joubert archives were inherited, in fact, by another big publishing house, music publishing house. So we went there and we gave all the names possible and imaginable, all the spellings that we can find of Chukhajan, which everybody says is difficult. And my answer to that is that you get used to saying Tchaikovsky, why not Chukhajan? So it is. So we went Chukhajan, Malian, the original librettist, Anmerian, who had translated in French in the 19th century during Chukhajan's lifetime. And then also titles like Horhoraga, Leblebidji, Garine didn't exist at the time, but that's late. But Fleur d'Orient, where does it come from? Fleur d'Orient, Oriental or Eastern flower. In 1904, we found out in a newspaper, an Armenian newspaper, saying, we are very happy to announce that one of the operettas of Chukhajan, Fleur d'Orient, is going to be presented in such and such French theater. And they are very happy to announce, but they don't say where they got the information from. There's no reference at the end, as usual. So we don't even know if it was performed, because afterwards there's total silence. Now, we said Fleur d'Orient, nothing. So finally, my French chorus master that I was working with, who's also a musicologist, said, give me all your research thing, I'll do it, because you don't have time, you're putting on the show, your mind is elsewhere. So I went home very happy that finally a second person is going to help me, and only to realize that everything I have under my hands is in Armenian. There's nothing that I can give him. So I had to translate all my research work and just summarize and very, very fast translations. I gave it to him. It took me more time. And one day he called me up and he said, you know, I found the source of the information that the guy says that it is going to be performed in 1904, and there's a new name into it. And that one name is the co-translator of the Fleur d'Orient. We don't even know if Fleur d'Orient is Leblebidji, we're assuming. And his name, Daniel Jourda, as a co-translator. Daniel Jourda, who is he? He's French. We go back to the publishing house and we say, forget all the Armenian names. Just tell us, what do you have as under the name of Daniel Jourda? That's all. And they gave me a title. Say, well, we have a manuscript called something, La Loi du Chéri, the Darling's law, or whatever. So I said, bring that La Loi du Chéri, let's see what it is. A box came like that, which was dated like 120 years old, kind of in dust. When we opened, it was, no, not Tutankhamun's tomb, but it was Leblebidji, Hor Ara written, and Fleur d'Orient also written on it. So now we need money, to scan all those things, 2,000 pages. Sorry, forgot the most important. All the entire material of the orchestra was there. And we were able to establish that it is Chuhadjan's handwriting. Not the material, because that's copies do that, but there are 2 vocal scores also in it, that it is Chuhadjan's handwriting. And they correspond to the material. There's no conductor score, but that's easy to do, because the entire instrument, all the instruments are there. So we need to scan, we need a musicologist, we need a composer, we need a translator from Turkish, the translator, historian from Armenian alphabet, Turkish written in Armenian alphabet, etc. We need a dramaturg, a copyist to put all that in computer and compare with other versions of piano scores that are a big scholarly work to come up with a final performance version of what Chuhadjan really intended, more or less, because one day somebody else will find something else which dates from earlier times, but this is the closest we can get to the original. This is what I wanted to say. So please, if you have any questions, feel free. I'm sorry if I took too long. Thank you.
Will you take some questions?
Yes. Yes, please.
So it seems that you have a very much of a focus on Garinid, the operette. Where just what I remember, that's what it was.
Yeah.
When I saw the first movie in Beirut in 1967, Garinid played for about 3-4 weeks. And I've seen it maybe 5 times, the same movie, because I loved it. So now there were a lot of controversies then saying that this movie is really, because there were, at that time there was Soviet Union, Soviet Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And the Tashnads, and they were like kind of a little bit going against it for some reason. But do you think that it was kind of done in the original way?
No, as far as the orchestration is concerned, no. We know who did the beautiful orchestration, but it's not in the style of
I still
Chuhadjan.
remember the music, actually. I can sing it to you.
It's beautiful.
For some reason.
Well, some of them you heard it here probably.
Yes, actually,
No, the melodic line is the same, or more or less. And as I said, it's not a complete work because they couldn't do it for film. It had to be more in the spirit of a musical rather than an operetta or opera buffa. It was very well sung, very well recorded. Best singers, best orchestra. I think even the orchestra was Russian. They recorded it in Moscow at a radio station there or whatever. No, the storyline was a little changed. I mean, it's not the original harem story. And of course, some people opposing during the Cold War the Soviet Union would have been a little, it was an opportunity to criticize it, because at the very end they included the fact that there is, in order to convince the father, they organize a fake marriage, and it's the cook that dresses up as a priest, so it's a fake priest, because real priests are idiots, and it's typically Soviet ending at the end, yeah. But the music is gorgeous, and that made the fame of Garine. A lot of people know about this thanks to that film.
Because I already remember also the song.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It was Henry Calaverton who was singing, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes, you can find, I think, things this on YouTube, or at least segments. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
Thank you so much for such a colorful and rich presentation.
Thank you. There's one question still.
Oh, I thought the applause was my question,
It was.
So, I was wondering if you could maybe just reflect a bit more on Chuhadjan, and if we have kind of memoirs, do we have anything that's actually kind of contextualizes these different pieces, and how does it fit into kind of maybe broader things that he made during the time period?
Again, it is always the tragedy of a lot of lost materials. Very little is known about his private life. We know he was married, he had some children, but we don't even know really the names. A lot of work has been written about him by Soviet Armenian scholars. But unfortunately, again, there's a little... It's almost like a propaganda thing. They have to... It is the problem of classical, what they call in philosophy, correct me if I'm wrong, professors, classical nationalism, which means that they are protecting the national idioms, and universalists such as Chouhadjian, or people who do not sound exactly national, are in danger in that kind of mentality, and they are neglected a little bit, and they're not encouraged. This is not Armenian, so out. So Chouhadjian's work has not been yet entirely investigated, and if it is by Armenians in Armenian, it is exaggerated in order to make him sound Armenian. In the books, they write things like Chouhadjian was suffering from the passion of creating a great patriotic nationalistic opera, and that's why he thought. I don't think Chouhadjian was thinking about that when he wrote that. He was thinking about music and creating a beautiful opera and things like that. When he went at a certain moment in his life, he goes to Paris hoping to produce his stuff there, and he doesn't find funding. And his heart was with Istanbul, and he was thinking about his country and the nostalgia, etc. They write in scientific, scholarly books things like that, where you want to say, who told you that? I mean, do you have a letter written by him to his wife or something? Where is the source of saying something like that? It's always over poetic, and in the ideology of classical nationalism, there's something called plus. We have to add. It's not enough. If Komidas, the great musicologist that wrote I don't know how many songs or saved 500, they will say, oh, but there are 1,500 others that were burnt and we lost it. You have to add, always add. That's called classical nationalism. And so we don't know how much is true or untrue in Chouhadjian's things, people who have written. I can prove things that are not true, like those who say that, oh, the opera was performed in 1868, 90. Impossible. Just one thing. Where is the media? Not one word is written during that period in Armenian papers or in Turkish papers or in French or English or whatever. Whereas at that time, whatever Chouhadjian did was constantly, the tiniest little concert was systematically echoed in all the media. How come nothing was written about such an important event as a first Ottoman opera being created? I mean, how can you say it was performed? And then I called some people who had written that in Armenian, and I said, where did you get that information? They couldn't answer. Oh, the Soviets destroyed my notes. I don't remember now. Okay, they destroyed. So it's very tough. It's very tough. I wish we could find more things. And another thing I don't want to, maybe that's, unless someone has a very important question, but I'll finish with this. Once David Tichera told me, well, Gerald, if Chouhadjian was a great composer, why don't we know about him? And I don't know what took me, because I'm not that politically motivated necessarily, but suddenly came out like that. I said 1915. And he said, like, what do you mean 1915? I said, well, David, do you think only 1.5 million people died? That's all? I mean, there was an entire heritage, especially the Western Armenian heritage, the Istanbul Armenian heritage, that was dispersed all over the world. Why would I find Chouhadjian's original orchestration in Paris? And why do you find, if you go to the Yerevan Museum today, piano scores of that Leblebi Horhor Agha, given as a gift, sent to Yerevan from Rio de Janeiro? What the heck were they doing in Rio de Janeiro? And this is why today and at the same time it's fascinating, because there's a lot to be done and a lot to be found. I wish I could find the translations of WWG in German, Russian, and Greek. I have the French old translation, not what we did, but the old one. And I know that they're Russian, and they were performed by a Greek company, by a German company at the time. Right after 1910, 20s, that period. Anyway, this is. Did I answer your question? I think someone has a question about food.
Maybe we should have. I'll ask the last question.
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me. So I was just wondering, based on his music, right? What can you tell as far as what's different from Arshak, between Arshak and Liturgy, right?
Yeah.
So what does he pick on when he's actually composing an opera about an Armenian king versus something that seems to be much more
Fun. Yeah, entertainment.
well, maybe not even fun, because if indeed what I said about, and I got it from some source, I don't know, you may dispute it, that he was interested in going in the street and picking up
Yes.
kind of ethnographic.
Well, that comes a bit later than Arshak. I mean, Arshak, it was his first piece. He was quite young. And he did a wonderful opera, which some people unjustly say, it's like Verdi. It's not. It's not like Verdi. It is similar simply because they lived at the same time and created more or less at the same time, and both were inspired by the Donizetti and Bellini and all the Italian 19th century bel canto thing. But they had each one their own personalities and different ways. Chouhadjian was more cosmopolitan composer than Verdi, because he sometimes you hear things like Tchaikovsky, or there are some other elements of German music in it, and suddenly, even in Arshak, there are suddenly Eastern elements that come in. The Italians look at the harmonies he has created and say, well, there are moments where it's not Armenian, but it's definitely not Italian. So it's obvious. And then he was in advance also by making, not all the way to Wagner, but the orchestra plays a very important part in his work. Sometimes even has the main melody, and not the singer. The orchestra does the main melody instead of and that is quite advanced for his period. He quit all that and he started to do light operettas, and we found out that he had a great sense of humor. He has other operettas too. And that's when, especially, he started to listen more to urban music in the streets and pick up things, etc. That's much more connected with his operettas. His last opera is completely Eastern, and it's called Zemire, and it is Arabic tale, which inspired me to make the adaptation of Garinet into moments of Arabic tales. And it's a beautiful, but as you see, after Arshak II, there's nothing Armenian anymore in his plays, in his storylines. He has an operetta based on Gogol's The Inspector General, adapted into Turkish life in a remote village in Anatolia, etc. And all these things have to be restored, and they haven't been performed since then. The two other operettas and Zemire, they need to be restored also. So, but I wish we could find a group of people who would create a foundation only for, not for Chouhadjian, but performing arts. We have foundations for scholarships, for Armenia, for such and such thing, for churches and things like that. But we never have purely artistic, not cultural, because when you say cultural, they might also understand the stuffed leaves, or kebabs. That's culture too. No, art, and just art. A foundation where people like me or other people, the young generation, would just knock at the door and say, I have this project, if you accept, and if you think it's important, can you give a grant? We have to create that kind of fund in the diaspora. It is important, because Armenia has it. I mean, nowadays they're suffering but it's a state after all. I mean, it's a republic. They have cultural ministries and other things, And when Armenia knocks at the door of a diaspora foundation like Gulbenkian or Parekorzagan or whatever, immediately money is sent over there because it's Armenia who's asking. Whereas in the diaspora, people who are trying to do what I am trying to do, putting Armenian art on the international scene, which demands top quality performances. You cannot put a community level semi-professional thing and say this is our culture. No, it has to be very well done, at least on the, more or less on the same levels as those big cities like Paris or London or whatever. And so that means professionals, and professionals mean money. Every single rehearsal you saw, this seems to you like a little showcase that we were having fun to do. There were 40 people there involved. Each one is paid 150 euros per day, minimum fee, minimum union fee. 3 weeks of rehearsals. Calculate in your minds what that means. 3 weeks times 40 times 150. And that's I'm not talking about sets, costumes, or things, other expenses. See what that makes. So it's very tough, and we need a good foundation like that. So perhaps Ann Arbor will create one day. No?
Inshallah.
No. Thank you.
Thank you.